Hello, everyone. On behalf of the Philadelphia chapter of NAAAP, I would like to welcome everyone to our Lunch and Learn webinar today, Connecting the Dots, Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity. Before we get started with the program, a quick introduction about myself and NAAAP. My name is Cindy Ng. I'm the Executive Vice President for the Philadelphia chapter of NAAAP. Professionally, I'm a partner at Evergreen Financial Partners with offices in the greater Philadelphia area. We are a financial services firm that focuses on helping individuals, families, and business owners reach their financial goals through a spectrum of services, including long-term asset accumulation, preservation, and distribution strategies. For those who may be new to NAAAP, which stands for National Association of Asian American Professionals, we are a non-for-profit organization that promotes the career advancement and leadership development of Asian American professionals in all fields through networking, promoting Asian cultures, and supporting diversity and community service. NAAAP has been actively involved in many community outreach efforts. Our team also focuses on building an inclusive community that extends beyond Asian American professionals. We welcome professionals of all ethnic backgrounds to join as our members. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our two moderators for today's webinar, Joel Kentindik, Human Resources Manager from Independence Blue Cross, and Shachira Sethi, Sourcing Manager at FMC. Enjoy the webinar. At this point, Joe, I'm turning it over to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Cindy. And thank you. I'm very excited to have everybody attending this virtual session. Again, as Cindy mentioned, my name is Joel Kentindik, and in my day job, I am a leader in HR at Independence Blue Cross, but also I do support NAAAP as a Vice President of membership. Again, this is such a great organization, and this is such great timing. Again, you think about the environment that we're in, not only with the pandemic, but also the D&I conversations that are coming to the forefront. For many of you, it's a switch from the virtual to a virtual workplace. You got to adapt to the new landscape and shifting our mindsets a little differently. And it's important for NAAAP to continue to support the region by cultivating and empowering leaders, and then also connecting professionals and engaging them with the community. For many of you that are entering into your career, or those that have been spending several years in the workplace, as well as mid-management and senior management, this session will give you perspective on creating an environment that promotes inclusion. And then finally, at the end of the session, we're going to have opportunity for you to have a Q&A and ask questions that might be prevalent or things that you want to hear from the panelists. That will be actually supported by members of NAAAP. So make sure that you're adding those questions throughout the session. We'll make sure that we curate them and we listen. And really at the end, we're going to figure ways to connect you with these specific leaders. We'll leave space and time to figure out the best way to connect, whether it's through LinkedIn or through email addresses. But again, we'll save that for the end. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to transition this over to my partner, Jay, who is going to be handling the introductions of the panelists and taking on a portion of the conversation. And then we'll get right into the Q&A. Jay?
Thank you, Joel. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion today. My name is Shachira Sethi, and I work as a sourcing manager for FMC. I would like to thank NAAAP for inviting me to co-moderate this session along with Joel. And it is with great privilege I am able to introduce our panel speakers for today. We have with us Lisette Martinez, who is our EVP and Chief Diversity Officer at Jefferson Health and Thomas Jefferson University. We have Subarna Malakar, Director and Global Diversity and Inclusion Officer at FMC. And we have Vu True, Senior Manager, Campus Diversity and Military Recruiting at Comcast. So at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Lisette to formally introduce herself.
Thank you, everyone, for the invitation to come and speak with all of you today. I'm just going to do a short introduction, as I know we'll get into a lot more in our questions. But again, my name is Lisette Martinez. I'm the Executive Vice President for Inclusion, Diversity, and also Community Engagement for Jefferson Health and Jefferson University. I just started here in May. I arrived in the middle of the pandemic, but so happy and proud to be here. So I'm just a little over 4 months here at Jefferson, and also I'm also new to Philadelphia. So prior to joining Jefferson, I was the Chief Diversity Officer at Yale New Haven in New Haven, Connecticut. And then prior to that, I'm from the Midwest. So I was also in charge and led diversity and inclusion efforts at TriHealth out of Cincinnati. Born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, diversity and inclusion is just a passion of mine since I was a child. And I've been able to lead both TriHealth and Yale to a national recognition of diversity management, which I plan to do the same here at Jefferson as well. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Lisette. Sabrina, would you be able to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Jay, and thank you, Joel. And thank you, NAAAP, for having me here today. I really appreciate it. And I thank you all for the audience for taking the time out of your busy schedule during lunch. Hopefully, all of you are having lunch while you were listening to us, if you're in the East Coast region. But if you're in West Coast region, maybe you're having breakfast at this time. Just a little bit about myself. I am a director and a global diversity inclusion officer for FMC Corporation. We are a agricultural science organization, really global in a sense that 75% of our employees are outside of US. But in my role, I really lead our global D&I diversity inclusion framework, putting a strategy together with our senior leaders and really moving the needle in a sense that, the programs that we're putting in place, the actions that we have are really sustainable for the long run. We think of diversity inclusion as something that is not just an HR strategy. It is actually a business strategy for us. And so we take very seriously in terms of the work that we're doing, and we hold people accountable for that. But I'm really happy to be here to have this discussion today. So thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. Lou?
Yeah, hi, thanks Jay, thanks Joe, and thanks Nat for having me here. Like Sabrina said, for the audience, thanks for joining us today as well. I basically grew up here in Philadelphia. Has been with Comcast now over 10 plus years. Right now at Comcast, throughout the years, things get power up. So right now at Comcast, I lead the diversity recruiting, the campus recruiting, and the military recruiting. Diversity is important to us. We want to make sure that our workforce reflect the customer we serve and the demographic within the United States. So it's part of our DNA, and I'm proud of it. But thank you for having me here today.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And thank you everyone for sharing a little bit of a brief update in terms of your bio and what you're doing currently. But this is a great transition. As many of us do, we wear many hats in lives. And for you, your hat is around diversity and inclusion. So I'm going to start with you, Lizette, and then we'll follow up with Sabrina and then Vu. What led you into your career in diversity and inclusion?
Absolutely. I love answering this question. As I mentioned in my introduction, I come from working in a lot of different areas, and living in New Haven, coming from the Midwest. I grew up most of my life in Cincinnati, but I was born in Detroit, Michigan. And I'm a 70s child, and growing up in Detroit at that time was very black and white. I will tell you, our community didn't recognize the Hispanic population or the Asian population. It was just a black and white society. And I never saw myself within the schools that I went to. And really my story starts when I was in the 6th grade. And with an opportunity that came up later in life to join the diversity and inclusion field, a story of mine from when I was in 6th grade at 12 years old popped into my head. And it really begins with a camp trip that we had in the 6th grade to end our year, because we were all moving to 7th grade into another building. And we had an overnight trip over the weekend. And I remember that first day that we went to camp, we were coming out of a lunch line going into what they call the canteen for lunch. And I remember seeing that scene that we all probably already see today, where my black friends are on one side of the room and my white friends are on the other. It was the first time I'd ever really seen that in lunch, because you know, in the 6th grade or in elementary, we all sit at that little rectangle table, all the classes together, we're all together. This is the first time we all got to choose where we sit. And it just, I don't know, it was just weird to me where, you know, I felt like, where do I sit? That question popped in my head. And the counselor was like, Lisette, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, where do I sit? She said, you can sit anywhere. And I said, but my Black friend's on one side, my white on the other. And she turned around without questioning, made everybody move. And that movement she did throughout the entire weekend. And for some reason, at 12 years old, it made me feel like I was part of something. Like it just was a different feeling. And at 12, I didn't know what that word meant. But when the opportunity came for me to move my field into diversity and inclusion, and I read the job description, inclusion popped in my head. And that story made me think that feeling I had was inclusion. It was when I felt like I was part of something. And I want to make sure that everybody in our institutions feels that same way, that they are engaged and that they make an impact in the work that we do every day. So that really, that particular story moved me into this career. And I've been in this career now for over 15 years. Prior to that, I worked in supply chain and didn't even think about it. But now I'm actually living my passion.
Lizette, thank you for sharing your passion, and you can tell by the story that you told. It is a journey that started very early on. So, Barna, for you, how did you delve into this career?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's similar to Lizette in terms of you know, when I think about, you know, when you're growing up, right, and people ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? You never say, I want to be a career in D&I. You know, it's usually from an Asian perspective, and I'm sure a lot of folks can relate. It's like, oh, you know, engineer, you know, computer science, doctor, lawyer, whatever, but never a D&I professional. And there's not really a, you know, education around D&I, even in colleges. You know, you're either a psychology major or human resource management. But for me, I mean, I really go back to, you know, the why am I interested in D&I, right? And I talk about, you know, I think about, you know, 3 diversity life journeys that led me to in this role. You know, first, you know, I will say, you know, I was born in Nepal, you know, grew up in the States, and I was the youngest sibling and the only son with 3 older sisters, right? And so if you don't know how it is like growing up with 3 sisters, you know, you can talk to me after this webinar. But I had a very strong role models in my life. My grandmother, who was a matriarch of the family, and of course my mom and my 3 sisters. I saw firsthand in terms of some of the things that they went through as a woman in the life. And I will say, like, you know, that's where my journey of gender equity started. And I'll say that, you know, actually that gender equity journey continues with my wife and my daughter, who is 13 going on 30, right? So definitely my gender equity journey started there. But when I think about, you know, some other life experiences, it could be, for me, it was similar to what Lizette said. You know, when I came to this country in early years and my family migrated here, my second diversity moment was in a primary school, you know, my elementary school, where kids in my class did not look like me or talk like me. And so when I was back in Nepal, I was a majority. Everybody spoke the same language. Majority of the folks that were in Nepal looked like me, you know. And so from elementary school on, going from majority to a minority, and then really labeled as a person who is Asian American. You know, I was always a Nepali in Nepal, but here in the US, I'm Asian American, right? So I would say my race and ethnicity journey started there. And when I think about the third moment of my life journey, it was really when I joined the US military and I became, you know, where I met soldiers with from different walks of life, with different backgrounds, different perspectives, different experiences. But you know, in the Army, you have to have one goal, one mission, and really thinking about the whole team. You know, it's a person of not just one; it's the whole team. So when I think about, you know, what Lizette said in terms of inclusion, really started for me where I felt like, hey, no matter where you are or where your background is, where your different perspectives are, you know, we are all one team and we all have respect for one another. So I will say that, you know, my inclusion journey started there, and what better way to utilize my experiences that I've gone through with my life, use it as a passion, right? And really thinking about, you know, yes, I mean, I studied computer science, and after the military, I went to college and studied computer science. I got my MBA, but I felt like my passion really is diversity and inclusion, because I feel that's where I can really leave a legacy behind. It is around diversity and inclusion. That's why I, you know, made it a job and made it a career out of D&I.
Thanks, Subarna. And again, thank you for your service, first of all. I appreciate that you sharing that with you. It seems that Lizette and Subarna, it seems early on your experiences were started early, you know, through childhood. Vu, for you, I mean, I would love to hear from your experiences. Like, how did you get into this realm too?
Yeah, no, thank you. And Sabana, again, thank you for your service as well. And Lisette, I forgot to say this a little earlier, but welcome to Philadelphia. Hope you like it so far. But for me, I get into DNI actually a lot later in my career, right? I actually didn't even know what DNI was when I was in college, to be honest with you, right? Didn't really pop up in my head, didn't really know much about it. I was a finance major. I want to become a stock trader, right? That was where I want to be, right? And and after I graduated from Temple University, I moved out to California. I had my own company. It was a startup. It was a sales company. And then I quickly realized that I need a diverse team, right? Because for certain territory, I was send certain sales rep in there, right? It's easier for them to relate to the community, right? Easier to build trust, and really at the end, it was really about revenue, right? That really got me into thinking about diversity and inclusions, and that philosophy. You know, and we did really well with sales, right? And my sales rep did a great job because they can relate, they build trust quickly, and it was great. So, but you know, when I start moving to the corporate world and become actually a recruiter for Comcast, I carry the same philosophy with me. I just thought that it would be great for the department, the company, if they have different point of view. So when I submit candidates, right, to hiring managers, I always want to make sure that it was a diverse slate, right? Just make sure that we have representation from gender, POC, right? Really try to build out that diverse workforce. And when Comcast bought NBC Universal, you know, we made a lot of promises on the diversity piece, and we create a diversity role. And because of my, you know, passions in diversity and inclusion, and you know, the middle slate and all those things, I decided to go for that role. Right, something different. Really give me an opportunity to really, you know, hone in that skill set, really learn something new, because I've been in recruiting for 6-7 years already. So I just didn't want to continue to become a recruiter that way. And this was a window of opportunity. So I went for that role, got the role. Was really green, right? You know, from the DNI space, and then start building the team out, so having director managers, and learning from those leaders, and different Comcast and bounce around a little bit, all in diversity, from diversity recruiting from the talent acquisition side to the DNI side, right? Really looking at the ERGs, rate retentions, and things like that. So the rest of the history, I'm still with Comcast right now, leading the diversity, the military recruiting, and recently added campus on. And campus is important for us too, because we do have early career roles, right? And that will be the DNA, the pipeline. For us, so we want to make sure that we have a diverse workforce from the interns cohort programs, and then hopefully we can convert them to full-time employee. But yeah, so that's how I got into the DNI side a little bit later in my career, but really from the angle of general revenues and making money and things like that.
Thank you so much, Vu. It's always great hearing about a company's strategy and what they're doing to increase their pipeline. And Subarna, Lisette, all of you, it's nice hearing about how you got into your journey and how you pivoted into this career. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to redirect the conversation a little bit more towards what organizations are doing. I believe D&I has become table stakes for most organizations. These conversations have been going on, for over a decade. Most recently, we're seeing the conversation of equity be introduced to this larger conversation. So can you speak a little bit towards what is diversity inclusion and then what is equity? Because I feel that they're, intertwined, but they're three separate concepts. So Lisette, why don't we start with you?
Sure, absolutely. So diversity, inclusion, and equity all have different definitions, and I'm actually going to start with a quote that I absolutely love from Brene Myers, and I think probably a lot of you may have heard of this quote. But she explains that diversity is like being invited to a party, right? We're all being invited. We all have access, right? Or, well, we want to make sure we have access. But inclusion is that feeling that you get when you've been asked to dance, right? We all know that feeling, right? Maybe it was that first time you were given a project that would get you in front of leadership, or that opportunity when in a meeting, suddenly the vice president leading the meeting asks you for your thoughts, right? And that feeling of, wow, I matter. For some folks, it's hard to imagine not being included because the opportunities have always been presented. However, for some, those opportunities are very few. But imagine a work environment where leaders intentionally ask, invite, and assign projects that lead to advancement to all of their staff. How would all of them feel about the impact that we make in our own organizations? So this is what builds a business case of higher productivity. When you can include a team, you have engagement of a team. That is what inclusion is. Equity is when we're really seeking to ensure fair treatment, equality of opportunity, and fairness in access to information and also resources for all. So we believe that this is only possible in an environment where we build it upon respect and dignity. And that's what we're trying to do at Jefferson, which is what we try to do also in healthcare. So equity means different things for everyone. However, working to break down barriers to access and increase resources helps us get closer to bridging those gaps of health disparities and also racial disparities within our organization. So there is a difference. Diversity, it's any difference that makes a difference. You've been asked to the party, right? Inclusion is that feeling of engagement. You've been asked to dance, and equity is to make sure we have ensurement of fair treatment and equality of opportunity.
Thank you. I think that was very relatable for everyone. So thank you for sharing that quote. Subarna, would you be able to share your thoughts around those three topics?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think Lizette is right on in terms of defining some of those terms. And I love that quote, Lizette, as well, from Verna Myers. I believe she's a chief diversity officer for Netflix now.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I think, diversity, I mean, there's probably a laundry list of things that makes us diverse, right? It's basically understanding that each individual is unique, and we need to recognize our individual differences. And that goes around, it's not limited to race, gender, LGBTQ, sexual orientation, gender identity, veteran status, what have you. There's a laundry list of diversity that's there. And I think what's important is, in the organization, I think, we want to focus on not only bringing diverse talent in, but how do we create an environment for inclusion? And what Lizette said is really creating that environment where everybody can bring their whole stuff to work, right? And for us, not only that you have to do that, but you also have to put in place some of the policies, processes around equity. We want to make sure that we guarantee a fair treatment, provide opportunities and advancement for those that are striving to identify or eliminate barriers, right? And we want to have a full participation from everyone, not only selected group. We want to have a full participation. The other term that has been going around in the D&I circle is this belonging. I don't know if you have heard of, belonging. I think it feels like it's another component to inclusion. It is, I think, where your employees truly feel like they're included, that organization really care for them as individual, where they can bring their authentic self to work. So these are some of the things that, you know, we're all looking at. And I think just like any other, you know, field, the diversity inclusion field also is moving towards equity, belonging, as part of our overall conversation.
Thank you so much. Wu, would you be able to share your thoughts on the same?
Yeah, I'll make it quick. I'll put on my headphones. Hopefully it's a little bit clearer for some of the audience out there, and let me know if you have trouble. But Lisette and Savannah, you know, hit it on the point, right? So I'm not going to repeat, you know, what they said. But funny about belonging, we actually at Comcast we ran a campaign last year and say you don't have to be to belong, right? We have 8 different ERGs group within Comcast, and you know, what we want is we want to make sure people feel that they belong there, right? They don't have to be, you know, African American or blacks to join the band group, right? You know, anyone can, right? And our goal is really make sure that people are learning from different culture, right? Experience different things. So we ran that campaign, and a lot of people got creative with that, and we were able to give out prizes and stuff like that. So that's, you know, kind of the belonging for Comcast that we did last year. But you know, diversity and inclusion, they're more of an outcome, right? Like when you look at a company and say, oh man, this company is really diverse, right? From a perceptions wise. But inclusions, right? Also an outcome, right? You know, we do check in, right? We want to make sure that it's an inclusive workplace, right? We have ERGs, we celebrate, you know, the diversity history months and things like that, right? We want to make sure that people feel inclusive, belonging, just like the campaign that we did. But equity is not an outcome, right? It's more of a process. And similar to what Lisette and Shabana mentioned, it's really how can we remove those barriers, right? And really give people opportunities to grow and develop and because not everyone start the same way, right? You know, I moved here when I was 10, right? You know, people move, right? And relocate, and some were born here. And so not everyone start out on an even ground, right? So that's what equity is for. It's really just a process in place to help, and I'm glad equity is making its way into the DEI, right? Before it really just D&I, but I'm glad now that equity is there to help pull along.
Thank you. Thanks, Vu. And again, I'm not going to let you off easy because I think I'm going to go back around and ask you another question, and then we'll follow through with Sabarna and then finish with Lizette for this question. But you talked about diversity and inclusion. Again, whether it's in the workplace or it's in your personal life, you have to add to the equation equity and the term belonging. But you start looking how the world is revolving and evolving. My question for the group is, and I'm going to start with you, Vu, what can non-minority communities do to be better allies for the minority communities?
Yeah, so great questions, right? For the non-minority communities, you know, be a good allies, right? And to be an ally is really, you know, it's okay for you, you know, if it's, let's say if you're a white male, right? You know, there's a lot of white male on boards, right? And we're looking for sponsors, we're looking for, you know, mentors, right? So for non-minorities, I think first thing first is just to listen, right? Really reach out. It's okay to ask. I know when we went through, you know, tougher situation earlier this year, right? And I reach out to my colleagues and I just say, hey, I just want to make sure I check in, make sure that you're doing okay, right? You know, I know it's tough, but I know there are people out there that feel intimidated to ask questions like that, like, are you okay, right? Because sometimes they are not, you know, they have not have a chance to face those opportunities. You know, yes, you always say, right, practice makes perfect, but sometimes people don't have a chance to practice, right? And they feel uncomfortable. They don't know if they ask the right questions, are they going to get in trouble, right? And so there's a lot of, you know, gray area that sometimes you are afraid to just reach out. And I think I say it's okay to do so, right? As a non-minority, you have colleagues, you have friends, right? And you know, sometimes it's good for the person to know that you care, right? And you are there for them. Just voice up, because, sometimes stay in silence, and a lot of people have stayed in silence for a long time, lead to where we are today, right? And I think as long as people understand that it's okay, people make mistakes. You don't have to ask the right question the first time, but as long as you phrase it and put it in a good faith, right? That's shown that you care. I think you can do that. So that's what my suggestion would be: is just really just voice up. It's okay. Speak up. Ask those questions. Learn, and that's could be probably the good first step for someone to reach out to be an ally.
Those are great points, Boo. I mean, listening is very important. Speaking up is also important, but also learning to ask the questions. I think it is all a combination of that. Subarna, the same question to you. What can non-minority communities do to be better allies?
I mean, when you look at any organization, right? You have the majority and you have the diverse, which is minority, right? And I think, I mean, in terms of non-minorities, I mean, I think in my mind, what they can do is really use their power and privilege that are given to them, right? And really be intentional about supporting the minorities in the organization. That comes with what Vu said, listening, showing empathy. When you see stereotypes or bias or microaggressions that are happening to others, how are you going to not be a bystander, but really, have those conversations. I mean, we have at FMC, we have a value called respect for people. That's one of our key values as an organization. At the end of the day, that's what I think people should do. They should respect one another. They show that empathy, to show that, listening skills, and really be someone who is willing to help change the narrative, because we know like what has happened in the past, it's not going to be the same in the future. So everybody has a role to play, especially the non-minorities, to move the needle. And there's a benefit for everyone when you do that, So I would say really in our company, it's our core value, which is respect for people.
No, that's awesome. It's built into your core values, because again, that becomes a part of you as an employee, specifically for FMC, but I would imagine for many of you that are on the panel, as well as the 68 people that have attended this session. Lizette, I'm going to close it out with you for this particular question. What can non-minorities, from your perspective, do to be better allies?
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it any more beautifully than Subarna and Vu already explained. These are things, for me, it's those top three things I think that we've already covered. And Vu started off with, listen, speaking up and asking why when things you have a doubt about something, being intentional with inclusion, and being intentional with goal setting and holding teams accountable for them. So with those three areas, when we think about, and Vu said it beautifully, speak up when you see something wrong. Discrimination is not an issue for minorities. It's an issue for us all. And when we see something wrong, we can't stay silent. And I think that when non-minorities see that, it's important to not just walk away, but to speak up and say, hey, here where we work, we're not going to have that. And actually move on taking actionable steps to make sure that when they see things, that you say something, because when you stay silent, you perpetuate racism. You allow it to continue. So speaking up and then asking why. When we don't see diversity numbers, when we don't see recruitment numbers in specific departments, put pressure on leadership. Ask why. Ask the questions. Be a part of that change. And being intentional with inclusion. Vu mentioned checking in and being open with employees. It's about listening and being honest. Because you know what, we hold these sessions at Jefferson called Brave Conversations. They stand for bold, relevant, authentic, valuable, and educational conversations. We put this platform together to provide employees a safe space to talk about experiences and concerns. And we have non-minorities participate all the time, outraged with what's happening in our environment, wanting to know, what do I do? And how do I start the conversation? Well, it starts by listening, framing that listening session to how you respond. And you may not have the answer, but listening really does help the healing process, but also being open and honest about what you know and what you don't know. That's what's going to create trust within your employees. And then holding people accountable for your teams. Set goals for your department. You know, we may be leaders in diversity and inclusion, but there are hundreds of departments in our organization.
Yeah.
Listen, as a manager, set the goal. If this is an intentional goal, set it. We're not going to stop you. We're going to support you. You want numbers? Come to us. We're your consultants. We're your service line. Let us know, and we're going to tell you how many non-white employees you need in your department to reach a benchmark. Promise you, we'll be there.
You know, this reminds me of like the ABC shows, What Would You Do, right?
Yeah.
You know, right? Perfect. You know, you see people step in, speak up, really doesn't matter what topic it is. But once they see that someone getting picked on, a bully or whatever, so that really reminds me of that show. And that's what an ally can do, really just step in and help out.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Lisette and Vu. I think it's so important to emphasize the importance of allies because they are crucial to the successful D&I strategy of any organization. But to your point, Lisette, also setting those intentional goals and holding leaders accountable, that's really what's going to drive the change. So thank you so much for sharing that. Before I pivot to the next question, I just want to remind the audience to feel free to send in questions. We will have a Q&A session towards the end of the panel. So feel free to type them in the chat box and we will certainly get to them. So the next question I wanted to pivot towards is specifically towards you, Lisette, in the healthcare industry. I came across an article in Men's Health specifically talking about the racial disparity between white men and Black men for the onset of diabetes, essentially. And there's a direct correlation between the onset of diabetes and the access to care. When we take a look at that a little bit closer, we see that there's a link to the onset of diabetes and their education and their access to preventative medicine. So I know this is an area that isn't frequently talked about. I think we talk about D&I in the workplace, but we see these disparities in other places in our life. So are you able to speak to a little bit about what Jefferson is doing to address these disparities and increase minorities' access to healthcare?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I will talk about, you know, we are very thorough in our healthcare system, and we have so many people in charge of tackling, you know, health disparities within our community, but also internally within the organization. So when we look at our, you know, our social determinants of health that we call them, and our economic disparities in healthcare, we really pay attention to those social determinants to see how they affect our patient population with health equity. And so just to give people a background on what social determinants of health are, they're really complex circumstances in which individuals are born in and they live in that impact their health. And you talked a lot about statistics, Jay, on diabetes within our communities. But they really include factors such as, you know, political, socioeconomic, and cultural constructs, as well as place-based conditions, including accessibility to healthcare and education. You know, you look at things, some of those social determinants of health include income level, educational opportunities, gender inequity, racial segregation. You know, those are some things and many others that affect access to care. And our community initiatives at Jefferson, we have two large communities within Jefferson that maybe some of you have heard of or maybe not, but we have the Center for Urban Health, which is run by Dr. Ricky Brower, that actually manages the building of trust within our communities here in Philadelphia in providing assistance to help with resources to tackle and bridge the gaps of these social determinants, to really help and look at where our most chronic illnesses are and help create preventative healthcare measures to make sure that we bridge those gaps and look at how we provide additional access to care for those in needs, especially with high chronic conditions like diabetes. The other program that we have here within Philadelphia is called PCHE. It is the Philadelphia Collaborative for Health Equity, which is run by Dr. Jack Ludmere, who is our Executive Vice President for Health Equity here at Jefferson. So what he's doing as well is partnering with organizations across Philadelphia who manage these chronic illnesses in all different capacities to make sure that we are funding them and providing them the right resources to help our community in those high-stricken areas within Philadelphia to make sure that we have access. Now, internally for our organization, we're trying to also make those links. So when we see patients come in, we make sure that we understand from our patient population by demographics what those chronic illnesses look like, so that we can see that the patients that are coming in our door, that our community efforts are linked directly to make sure that we also provide those preventative healthcare measures to make sure we bridge those gaps as well. So internally, we're taking an effort within our entire footprint to understand our data, make sure that we have accuracy within our electronic medical records, and work with our safety and quality divisions to make sure we have the right information going out and patient population health create those healthcare measures that they need, whether it's resources or education that we also bring back out to the community to make sure that we bridge those gaps.
Oh, thanks, Lizette. And it looks like you're doing both internal and external work to help with those disparities. As we said, this is kind of like the lightning round where we have individual questions for each of you. So Sabrina, you're up next. So from my end, the question that we're going to ask individually is, how is D&I different, both regionally, nationally, and internationally, as you think about your company and how you support it from a D&I perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, it's, my company, FMC, is very much global. We are in 60 different countries. 75% of our population is outside of US. And I even say not just regionally, nationally, and internationally, but I think even take it further by how is it different from an industry standpoint as well, right? You could be in IT, or you're in a consumer goods industry, retail industry. It depends on a different conversation, depends on different industries as well. But I think you always have to start with what Simon Sinek says, right? You start with the why. Why do you have diversity and inclusion, and how do you start that conversation? So business case for diversity and inclusion is very important, right? Putting that business case. Like I used to work for Unilever. Unilever sells, it's a global organization, sells 80% of their products to women, either beauty products and so forth. But they saw that 80% of their workforce was male. So how can you have a product that you're selling to a female consumers, but your internal makeup doesn't reflect your consumer base, right? So business case has to be very, very clear. When I think about diversity and the conversation we're having around, from a global standpoint, we know that gender, for example, people with disability, and possibly with generational differences are something that is almost common when we go from a global standpoint. Those are the conversations that I think we can have, because those are the things that we can actually measure. We capture those data. But when you come to things like the LGBTQ, for example, it might be different based on that local country's legal issues that may come up, where even in the U.S., a few months ago, a LGBTQ individual could be fired just for being, gay or lesbian or bisexual, transgender, right? So I think some of these topics are different for different regions, different countries, but we try to focus really around inclusion and that sense of belonging and that equity, because no matter what diversity you may have or what you're tackling and what you are thinking about as part of your strategy, we want to have that employee to have that sense of belonging, right, to the company. And there's been a lot of focus around how do you correlate, inclusion or diversity with productivity or with engagement, and financial performance of the company, right? more diversity means more financial performance. So, I mean, the business case is clear. It all depends on having a global strategy, but how can you pivot that to a local country or local region? It really makes a difference. And having a clearly defined governance model. Like, for example, we have Inclusion Council that is led by the president of that region to drive diversity for that region, right? And so when Lizette talks about not only, we want, we're doing talking the talk, we want our senior leaders and our managers to walk the walk as well, right? And accountability really lies with, everyone. We may be running D&I for the company, but accountability is each and every one of us has a role to play to drive diversity and inclusion. But that's just a little bit of what I think in terms of the conversations we're having around diversity in different places.
Thank you so much, Subarna. I think it's great to hear about how customized D&I can be around the world, but still have an umbrella strategy of how to be inclusive in the workplace. So thank you for sharing that. Vu, a question we have for you is, your space, specifically in the military and campus recruiting, is niche when we're taking into consideration talent acquisition strategy as a whole. So can you speak to some of the challenges that you're seeing specifically in the military or in campus recruitment in terms of increasing diverse pipeline?
Yeah, no, great question. So, there's many challenges when it comes to military recruiting if a company is not prepared for it, right? So, one of the challenges I think, pretty easy out there is just translation of the skill set, right? I think there's a disconnection between the military community and the recruiters, right? Because not too many veterans know how to translate their skills onto a resume, right? They know what they do and they put it there, but sometimes it's military terminologies that recruiter is so used to look at a corporate resume, look at the resume and say he or she's not a good fit, right? Because they can't translate it, right? So I think there is a gap there. And then unfortunately, not every companies out there have an ERGs like a VetNet that Comcast has, right? To partner with our talent acquisition team to really help us understand, the terminology, the translation, the rankings, right? So that's one thing that I think, I'm lucky is that I have a recruiter under me. She's from the Air Force, so she understands the rankings, the terminologies, and everything like that. She's the bridge between us and the recruiter and the military candidates, right? And spouses too, right? We want to make sure that we take care of the spouses as well. But outside our VetNet team, we actually also have a military veterans affairs. We actually have two groups, right? One is an ERGs, and one is more of a business unit, right? And that veterans affairs, again, partner with us, partner with VetNet, but really help us, understand, there's potentially partnerships out there that we can partner with, who we should partner with, the benefits that we should have, right? We even have a concierge group to help, with military and spouses because, they have to go on leaves and things like that. So, I'm lucky, right, to have those groups. But this year, we what we did is that we want to equip what we can control, right? We can, so we equip our recruiters an opportunity to be certified how to recruit veterans, right? So we did that across our enterprise with all the recruiters and sourcers so that this way they are comfortable with the ranking, the terminologies, and things like that. We enhance our website a little bit better, right? So that it's more military friendly, right? And then from the hiring perspective, we partner with a group called Hiring Our Heroes. I think most of you have heard of them before. They have a really great fellowship program. So for any of you that want to learn more about it, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can just Google me and you can find it. And then we also look at a program called Skill Bridge, which is an Army program, right? It's a great opportunity. You have to go through some paperwork, but once you get that iron out, I think it's a really good opportunity for a company to leverage them. And then we also, what we did is that we mapped out the whole United States, big bases, right? So there are, big Army bases, Marine bases, but there are also combination, right? It's a base but combined between, a few branches. And then we, compare that against some of the big offices that we have, right?
Mhm.
That this way we can strategically go to those bases. And one thing that we learn also is that when people transition out of the military, the government's paying for their relocations, right? So, they could be in Kansas City, but if they are interested in an opportunity in Seattle or Philadelphia, they can relocate and the government will help them. So we look at those bases. We work with the TAP department, which is the transitioning program, and we see if potentially we can bring some of our leaders to go there and talk to the base. So we start building it out right before COVID hit. But those are some of the strategies that a company can do, right? And we know, with the TAP programs within the military base, they also try to help the veterans and their spouses with their resumes and the transition from, just to adapt to the corporate culture. But those are some of the challenges that we face, some companies may face, and some of the solutions that we are trying to come up with, try to help bridge that gap a little bit better.
Awesome. And Boo, thank you for sharing that. And I'm also just doing a time check. We're about 8 minutes before 1 o'clock. And, I would love to keep on asking questions. Jay and I have a plethora of questions, but I think it's also time, we have audience members that are aching to ask some of their questions. And I believe Diane Nguyen, who will be supporting us with some of the questions. And again, we might do a little bit more of a roundtable just because we have a little bit of time. Diane, do you want to, is there a particular question that you want to share?
Hi, everyone. So let's start with our first question. Sorry. Okay. Can you speak to how allyship operates at the organizational level or how leaders are facilitating it? Perhaps it's a new initiative in light of recent events?
And I'll direct it. I'll start with our pattern of Lizette, Sabrina, and then Vu. It looks like with the current events and where we're at in terms of narrative, how is upstairs or our leadership supporting the allyship across the organization or across your various organizations?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. I think one of the reasons I decided to come here to Jefferson was because of the commitment of our leadership, and I started just shy of the racial injustice that happened in our country with the murder of Mr. George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, which we're awaiting decision on that today from Louisville. And as we hear what's happening and we're seeing the outrage in front of us, I know at Jefferson Health in our institution, our leadership is committed to making sure that we support our employees because at this time, no matter who you are at Jefferson, we're not okay. We're seeing outrageous things that are affecting our job every day, and it's keeping us from being productive, but also hitting us emotionally. So we have a lot of support throughout the organization. We've started Brave Conversations and have now trained 25 facilitators with the support of leadership to make sure that we have trained individuals to have a safe platform for conversations to be open to start that healing process. But we also, and I think Sabrina had mentioned this too, we have councils that are set up throughout the entire enterprise at each division. And not only are they set up at each division, but the leaders of each of those councils are the presidents of each of those divisions. And that is the support and the allyship of the mission that we have on being vocal about our education, our talent goals, and our outreach in the community. And same with the university. So I have oversight of both the health system and our university. Every college has a council as well dedicated to diversity and inclusion with the same objectives. And the deans are those executive sponsors to make sure that we have the right leadership to lead the efforts throughout the entire enterprise. So when we have close to 40,000 employees and 8,500 students within our university, we have the right people being those allies to help support the initiative throughout the organization. And that's how we have organized and structured the way we move the needle in creating and cultivating an environment of inclusion, respect, and belonging.
Yeah, just to add on Lizette, I know we're running out of time. In terms of at FMC, our COO, Mark Douglas, became a CEO on June 1st of this year. And on his first day, one of the big things that he had to do was to make a statement around social justice and race equity, right? So we have a huge commitment from our senior leaders. We actually spent half a day tackling social justice and race equity in July in terms of how we're going to really frame up and really be an organization that really values that community. And what came out of that meeting really is to put a focus. So we have 4 leaders from our executive leadership team that is part of the task force, along with a few other individuals from the company, to really focus. I mean, we meet on a weekly basis to really focus on social justice and race equity in our organization, right? So we're not just talking. We are, we're also not making a knee-jerk reaction. We want to have a plan in place that is long-term, that is something that we feel that we need to do as an organization. So a lot of conversations are happening at the senior leadership level, but we also had conversation with our employees, similar to what Lizette shared. You know, we did several sessions around race ahead, really having a conversation around race equity, what's happening outside, how do we make sure that our employees are safe, and how are we going to help, be an ally for those individuals that are affected. So we have had those conversations. We had 3 conversations around that. And it was actually open to not only US employees, but to global employees. Because in some places, race issue, like for example, we have a big business in Brazil, right? And Brazil, if you look at it, 54% of the Brazilians are from African or from a Black minority, but it doesn't show up in a corporate world, right? So race issue is not only in the US, but also it's an issue that is globally. So we as a company is really tackling it head on, and we have senior leaders that are focused on driving it for us with our other leaders and managers as well.
Thank you. And I know that we're at about 2 minutes out. Vu, if you wanted just a quick, just to answer that question, and then we'll probably transition it over to Cindy to kind of close it out.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'll make it quick, right? Comcast, when you look at Comcast, you think it's a big company, right? We're global and everything like that. But one thing I love about us is that we feel like we are still a mom and pop shop, right? Brian Roberts, is a really good man, and that's how we feel as a family. So recently this year, and you all can Google this and you have more time to read through it. But he announced $100 million commitment over the next 3 years. To continue his commitment to the DEI, right? It's a multi-year plan that will focus on fighting social injustice, right? Investing back to our employee. So each group, business unit has almost like a DEI council, but we also build out a DEI council like across the board for the enterprise. And we're in the middle of doing that right now with leadership and employee. It's a great combinations, but also really want to invest and give back to employees. Right, and then on some of those, we'll go to media awareness and education as well. Digital equity, right? There's a big digital divide, right? From low-income house, they may not have the same internet and things like that. So we have a great program, Internet Essentials, and then also look at small business opportunity as well. So that $100 million commitment for the next 3 years will be in effect. So I'm proud to be a part of Comcasters, right? And Brian is a great leader, and love how he able to cultivate the environments that we still feel like it's a small, family business runs.
And again, we're at that time. Cindy, did you want to? I pass it on to you.
Well, thank you, Joel. And certainly before we close, I want to thank our panelists, Lizette, Suvarna, and Vu, for taking time out of their busy schedule to join us and share with us their journeys and invaluable insights on a very important topic. And also thank you, Joel and Jay Sheila, for being our fantastic moderators today and leading such a great discussion. And certainly also wanted to share with you several wonderful events coming up in October. 2 virtual events scheduled, webinars. On October 6th, we're going to be partnering with EY to host a CPE credit event on data privacy and the future of television. And also in October, we will be partnering with the Philadelphia chapter of Alpha, NAAAP, and IBA on 3 different topics. And the first one is going to be on October 15th, mental health and well-being, and then followed by 2 D&I themes on how to be an ally and managing unconscious bias and microaggressions. Registration open now for both of these events, and so please sign up. We'd love to see you there. And finally, on Saturday, October 10th, we'll be hosting a very special community service event, Healthcare Workers Appreciation Day, as a way of showing thanks to the healthcare workers during the pandemic. NAAAP and our volunteers will be gathering on this date to deliver donations that include hand sanitizers, masks, t-shirts, and meals to major hospitals in the greater Philadelphia area. We're very excited about this October 10th event with more information to come. Please check out our website, www.phl.naap.org, for our upcoming events. With that, thanks again, everyone, for joining us today, and hope to see you at our next event. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great one. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.